Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're tackling something I know so many of us struggle with, which is how to start speaking a language from absolute zero. Okay, let's dive into this, because today we are breaking down exactly how you can bypass all that frustration and start communicating way earlier than you probably ever thought possible.
Right off the bat, if you're learning a new language right now, I can almost guarantee this exact question has crossed your mind. You ask yourself, when should I actually start speaking? You know, it's literally the ultimate mental roadblock. It's the one question that just paralyzes most language learners. It keeps us stuck in textbook mode, where we're just endlessly consuming all this information, but never actually producing the language.
We tell ourselves these elaborate, honestly kind of exhausting stories. We think, well, maybe I'll start speaking after I memorize my first 1,000 words. Or maybe I really need to finish that massive grammar workbook first. Or I'll finally open my mouth when I hit a solid intermediate level. These are what we call the readiness myths. And the absolute tragedy of these mental hurdles is that we end up just sitting around waiting for this magical, perfect feeling of readiness to suddenly wash over us before we even try.
So the crucial point is, that beginner's belief of waiting until you feel 100% ready, it is a complete trap. The harsh reality here is that the feeling of being truly ready often never actually comes. You just keep moving the goalposts, right? You convince yourself you just need one more week, one more app module, or one more vocabulary list. And as a result, months or even years pass by without you doing the one thing you actually set out to do, which is to get meaningful speaking practice. Look, I completely understand the frustration. It feels incredibly unnatural to speak when you know for a fact you're missing pieces of the puzzle. But we need to firmly reframe our primary objective right now. The goal isn't to achieve absolute perfection before you open your mouth. The goal is simply to start communicating with the language you already have. Even if you only know 5 words, you need to put them to work.
Just think about it for a second. When children learn their very first language, they don't sit around quietly for 3 years waiting until they understand complex verb conjugations. No way. They just jump right in. They communicate using incredibly simple, single-word messages. Want, hungry, more, mine. It's a massive aha moment when you realize that kids instinctively prioritize getting their meaning across over worrying about complex grammar.
And isn't it completely fascinating that this isn't just some cute observation about toddlers? It's heavily backed by scientific research. According to usage-based theories of language development, which are strongly supported by the linguistic research of Michael Tomasello, language develops through meaningful use and interaction. It does not develop simply through memorizing rules in a vacuum. So the science gives us a real authoritative anchor to this idea. Actively trying to communicate a message always beats striving for mechanical perfection.
And this brilliantly illustrates one of the easiest, most effective ways to bypass that perfection paralysis. Sentence frames. Instead of trying to construct every single sentence from absolute scratch, you just learn flexible patterns. You take a foundational frame like, I like, I need, or I want to, and you literally just fill in the blank. I like coffee. I need help. I want to read. Relying on these frames immediately reduces your cognitive load massively and suddenly unlocks hundreds of different everyday topics for you.
Which brings us to a wildly empowering concept from language researcher Michael Lewis. He noted that language is often acquired and used in chunks rather than individual words. You do not need to treat a new language like some complex mathematical equation where you're constantly calculating which individual word goes where. You can totally bypass the math by relying heavily on formulaic language, basically grabbing entire chunks of words that just naturally belong together.
In fact, research in applied linguistics shows that highly fluent speakers rely on these exact types of formulaic expressions constantly. Things like, how are you? I don't know, that sounds good, or what do you mean? They use these phrases immediately to communicate. They skip the mental gymnastics of analyzing grammar every single time. As a beginner, you really severely underestimate how incredibly far a simple I don't know can take you in a new language.
Now, I can practically hear the next objection forming in your head, but I don't have anyone to practice with. Well, let's dismantle that right now. The common excuse is that you desperately need a conversation partner or a native speaker to get started. But the actual solution? Talking to yourself. It is completely valid, highly effective, real practice. By engaging in self-talk, you instantly strip away all the social pressure and that fear of embarrassing yourself. It is an incredibly practical technique. You literally just narrate your actions, your thoughts, or your surroundings out loud as you go about your day. I'm making coffee. I'm going to work. It's raining today. Not only does this let you produce the language regularly, but it acts as a sort of secret weapon. It's an incredible diagnostic tool. It quickly reveals hidden vocabulary gaps, words you suddenly realize you don't know, that you simply wouldn't notice if you were just passively reading or listening.
The biggest reason beginners struggle and eventually quit is because they try to say everything flawlessly from day one. They worry about grammar, they worry about pronunciation, they worry about mistakes, but research on communicative language teaching is abundantly clear here. Successful communication is far more important than perfect accuracy, especially in those early stages. Look, if the other person understands your message, your communication has succeeded. Full stop. Now, what's really interesting about this is how it fundamentally changes how we schedule our learning. We absolutely need to shift our focus away from those exhausting hour-long marathon sessions that rely purely on intensity. Instead, look at the immense power of frequency. Speaking ability grows through frequent, daily repetition. Small, consistent speaking habits are infinitely more powerful and far, far more sustainable than just burning yourself out once a week. To get you started, here is a rapid-fire, highly actionable toolkit of 2-minute daily habits you can start executing today. Seriously, just a few minutes is all it takes. Describe your day. Summarize the quick video you just watched. Talk out loud about your plans for tomorrow, or just answer simple questions aloud. You don't need a massive block of free time for this. You can literally do it while you're brushing your teeth. Let's move to and see how this builds into your overall timeline. Way too many beginners aim for fluency right out of the gate, but we need to radically redefine your expectations. Fluency is a distant step 4. The first true milestone is simply expressing simple ideas. Step 2 is expressing those ideas comfortably. Step 3 is expressing them naturally. Fluency comes much later, growing out of literally thousands of these small, imperfect speaking experiences.
So, when should you actually start speaking? As soon as you can communicate even the simplest message. You don't need perfect grammar, you don't need thousands of words, and you absolutely don't need to feel perfectly confident first. You simply need to begin. Because, and this is a massive paradigm shift, so I really want you to take this in, speaking is not the reward for learning a language.
It is part of the learning process itself. Waiting to speak until you know the language perfectly is exactly like waiting to step onto a tennis court until you already know how to serve like a pro. It's totally backward. Embracing this reality completely frees you from the perfection trap, and it ends the endless waiting game. You learn to speak by speaking.
Which leaves us with one final, incredibly important question for you. Since you now know that you don't need to be perfect, and that a single sentence frame or a 2-minute self-talk session is all it takes to build real momentum right now, what will you say today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Now get out there, make some glorious mistakes, and start communicating.